In Lesson 4, we learned how to identify dependent clauses. Because dependent clauses can't stand alone, this next lesson will cover how to join those dependent clauses to independent clauses. Before we do that, let's take stock of the types of sentences we now know how to recognize and compose. Simple sentences made up of one independent clause, and compound sentences made up of multiple independent clauses connected together. Of course, now that we've learned about dependent clauses, we can create a third kind of sentence, a complex sentence. A complex sentence is composed of at least one independent clause and one dependent clause, which can come in any order, dependent then independent, or independent then dependent. The order in which we join independent and dependent clauses has different effects on our readers and adheres to different rules. If the dependent clause comes first, a comma must come at the end of the dependent clause before starting the independent clause. For example, because, subordinating conjunction, the government, subject, censored, verb, the media, comma, the public, new subject of independent clause, never learned, verb, about the illegal detainment of prisoners. For further illustration, here's another example. However, if the independent clause comes first, followed by the dependent clause, no comma is needed. For example, the public never learned about the illegal detainment of prisoners is an independent clause beginning the sentence, so the dependent clause, because the government censored the media, can follow without a comma. But there is one exception to this rule. If the dependent clause begins with the relative pronoun which, a comma always separates the clauses. For example, the Fed raised the interest rate, comma, which caused 5 years of hardship and economic depression. For further details on punctuating relative pronouns and dependent clauses, refer to the handout Basics of Syntax Dependent Clauses linked in this module. Besides understanding the different punctuation rules, we also need to consider what information we choose to put in the dependent versus independent clause. Readers naturally place emphasis on the information contained in the independent clause over that in the dependent clause, so we should strategically place information in each clause based on the effect we wish to have on our readers. For example, notice the difference between these two sentences. In the first sentence, although the government censored the media, the public still learned about the illegal detainment of prisoners. Emphasis is placed on the public never learning about the illegal detainment of prisoners, the information contained in the independent clause at the end of the sentence. However, in the second sentence, the government censored the media, although the public still learned about the illegal detainment of prisoners. Emphasis is placed on the government censoring the media, the information contained in the independent clause that comes at the beginning of the sentence. Just like when we choose a rhetorically effective coordinating conjunction, our choice of a subordinating conjunction matters. That is, we use different subordinating conjunctions to convey different relationships between clauses. Below are some common subordinating conjunctions categorized based on their meaning. For instance, a dependent clause that begins with because or since contains information that is a cause or reason, while one that begins with if or though will contain information that is a concession or exception. Take a moment to not only review the other categories and examples listed here, but also revisit the Basics of Syntax Dependent Clauses handout linked in the module for an even more exhaustive list. To see how different subordinating conjunctions have different rhetorical effects and meanings, let's compare two sentences with two different subordinating conjunctions, when and where. In the first sentence, when I went to college, the huge campus was overwhelming, the subordinating conjunction when emphasizes time, so we understand that the campus was overwhelming at that moment. In the second sentence, where I went to college, the huge campus was overwhelming, the subordinating conjunction where emphasizes place, so we understand that the campus was overwhelming due to its location. Again, both are grammatically correct, but it's up to you, the writer, to decide which option best fits your meaning. In the first part of Lesson 5, we learned how to join dependent clauses with independent clauses to create complex sentences. We discussed when to use a comma when joining dependent clauses with independent clauses, how to strategically place the information in different parts of the sentence to have different effects on our reader, and how to select the most effective subordinating conjunctions. Now is your chance to practice what we learned. Please return to the Canvas module, open the Activity 3 document, and follow the instructions to practice correctly and rhetorically creating complex sentences. Remember to save your work as we will build on this activity in following lessons. Then move on to the next page of the module for the second part of Lesson 5, where we will discuss another way to combine independent and dependent clauses, compound complex sentences.